So I won't show any pictures of me. I'll spare you that image. But I will talk to you about Solaris. And before I delve into this, I'd just like to get a show of hands of who was at the customer consortium in Dresden 6 months ago. All the non-Sun folks. Wow, okay. Well, it's good that we have the next slide in there. We're just going to quickly revise some of the Solaris strategy that we talked about then. As a reminder, Mark Hamilton came on board or changed positions in Sun as the VP of Solaris marketing at the time, and he's very big on HPC. And I joined his team and took on the role of driving HPC across software, and in particular for Solaris. So we'll give you an update of what our strategy is, where we are, what kind of progress we've made in the last 6 months. And I heard some questions today about OpenSolaris in Indiana, both in the audience and outside in the breaks. So I'll spend a few minutes giving you an update, talking to you about what it is. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. A little bit about performance. So I'll spend a few moments talking about what we're doing in Solaris in particular that's new and exciting. And I'll try and keep us on track for the happy hour later on. So in terms of Sun's HPC portfolio and strategy, Solaris is a big piece of our software stack. It's a big piece of our entire story. You can see we've got a cross-company initiative that really drives across the systems, the storage, the services, and also the software organizations. And some of the fruit of that work has already been seen in previous conferences, and you'll also see some more of that this coming week at Supercomputing here in Reno. The other thing worth pointing out, maybe I should point with this. Does that work? Is that we are showing leadership. You heard this morning Mark talk about the TAC installation. While Solaris is running on the compute nodes, we do have, Linux is running on the compute nodes. Solaris is the OS of choice for the management nodes. And I think we'll be seeing more and more choices made in favor of Solaris based on the kind of progress that we've made in the last 6 months, actually the last year, I should say. So, barely read what it says. The kind of momentum that we see right now, and I'll go into this a little bit later, the kind of investment that Sun is making is very visible as well outside of Sun. We've been hiring, strategically we got Ian Murdoch on board, who is an industry icon in the Linux community, to try and figure out what we can do with Solaris to make it more appealing to a Linux user base. We also acquired cluster file systems. We had Preeta Ram speak earlier today. So that's a big sign on Sun's part that we are both serious about HPC in general and also serious about Solaris in HPC with some of the work that we're doing with Lustre and porting that to Solaris. And then finally, it's not just about Solaris. I don't want to give the impression that Linux isn't important to us. In fact, we have a very healthy business today selling Linux in HPC. Really, Sun is about choice. So what we want to make sure is that we give you best-of-breed options. And our support for Linux isn't going away. We're investing and we're creating offers, and I'll talk about that as well. But I also want to dispel the myth that Solaris isn't suitable or maybe is behind or hasn't got the features or support or momentum to play in HPC, because that may have once been the case, but that is rapidly changing. And I want to show you some of that progress. Some of the recent headlines that we've seen that you might have read about, I mentioned Ian Murdoch. There's a lot of momentum behind Sun in the x86 space, which of course for clustering and for HPC is getting more and more traction. And there should be 2 more bullets here. The acquisition of cluster file system, and we do have the Intel one there. We have obviously the agreement with Intel. For a long time we had a very strategic partnership with AMD, and it's good to see that we have both the major x86 players now in our portfolio. So what else is going on? This is specifically for the last 6 months since really I've been involved actively with this, and also since Mark has been paying attention to software. So we are creating bundles and offerings and distributions. This is happening right now, specifically for HPC. We have all these individual components, and you do get the value out of going to one single vendor, getting single support for these for the OS and the higher level stack components, but getting a bundle where you get more than just the OS. You think workload management, think Lustre file system when it becomes available, think the management side of things, XVM Ops Center, which will really help with the deployment and management of HPC installations. And then, of course, you can add to that. You can add third-party tools. You can add ISV applications. And this doesn't have to be a single offering. In fact, chances are there will be multiple offerings rolled out, targeted at verticals and targeted at specific configurations. So keep your eyes peeled. Again, we're going to be starting with Solaris since we have all those components, but we're also looking at doing the same for Linux. So Linux is not the second choice here. We're trying to give you equal choice. Innovation. This is fairly exciting and also fairly new. I mentioned at the last customer consortium that we were doing something with DTrace, and we were doing something with DTrace and OpenMPI. We're actually going to be showing the first fruits of that work at the show this week. And so how many people here know about DTrace? Okay, quite a few, so I don't need to explain necessarily what it is. We've put a slide on this later on, but really the work that's been going on has been with the community, with the OpenMPI community, to get DTrace probes into the open source project, and then, of course, back into Sun HPC cluster tools, which is our implementation of MPI. And that, of course, is unique to Solaris because DTrace is a Solaris feature. We've also been doing some good work with ROCs. A preview of that work is also available, and there's plenty of demos that we're showing, I think, that really show progress on the software side, and that really show that Solaris is making headway. There's also been some developments in the community. 6 months ago, we talked about OpenSolaris in Indiana, and it was very much a concept. We hadn't really seen any bits or bytes or results of what that might look like. Now we have a preview, and in fact, you saw it this morning when Mark had it installed on the laptop, on the live CD. So you are encouraged to join that project. You're also encouraged to join the HPC developer community, where really we're trying to establish a forum to define what an HPC distribution might look like. There won't be one size fits all. We've had that conversation earlier. But in order to define what the right sizes might be, we'll need that audience participation, in a sense. And we'll need to get input from customers and partners. And we don't really want to dictate what an HPC distro should look like, but we want to have that conversation, that dialogue. And it's an open source project, so we want to have the open source collaboration. At the same time, there's a lot of expertise at Sun, a lot of technical expertise. There's people in the room. You've seen some of the engineers, and there's many, many more that aren't here today that are also a great resource and that also want to have that exchange and be in touch with customers. So for that audience and for the sort of Sun-centric view of HPC, we are creating a portal, and we'll hear more about that tomorrow, so I don't want to pre-announce all that stuff. I'll also talk mention a few things about adoption and momentum that we will, again, be hearing more about this week. We've got, I mentioned, a close relationship now with Intel as well as with AMD, and we're actually exploring some of the synergies that we might get out of that partnership, where Sun has a customer-ready systems program, I should say, where pre-configured, pre-tested architectures can be shipped to customers, and it just works out of the box. It's been pre-verified. Intel has something similar, and so there's obviously some potential to work together on that. Furthermore, IBM, this is maybe not the newest of news, is embracing Solaris, but it's great to see such a major tier 1 vendor endorse Solaris on their platform. And it's a really strong endorsement. There's more platforms that we're interested in, but right now that's a significant vote of confidence, I think, for the OS. You'll hear more about services that are being announced for Solaris, specifically for HPC. NEC is going to partner with us on that, and again, there's going to be some announcements tomorrow that I won't necessarily preempt here. And then finally, some key HPC partnerships that we've had for years that are beginning to embrace Solaris as well. And a few of these have been in the press, a few of these have been mentioned at the previous consortium. So by far not the last of that list. To give you an idea of the momentum, we just talked about momentum and adoption. It's very easy, especially if one's been in the HPC community for a long time, to get very cynical and to say, well, Sun's been talking about Solaris for a long time. When are we going to see Solaris compete with Linux? Linux has got 90+% of the market share and clusters, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just wanted to get you a sense of the excitement that we're feeling inside of Sun, where if you really want to be associated with a product or a technology, you want to see that kind of a growth and adoption curve. This could be the iPhone adoption curve. It would be very similar. So there's a lot of adoption in the marketplace. This is across all markets. So obviously a lot of the enterprise customers that we have were the first targets we went after. But on the system side, we're seeing adoption by more and more commodity hardware platforms, and also specifically we're targeting HPC platforms. On the ISV side, a year ago, you might have had to choose Linux because certain applications weren't available. But revisit that assumption. There are markets now where we have pretty complete adoption and coverage of applications. EDA, if you're in the EDA business today, it's really worth looking at the applications we support, because that list is very long and still growing. Likewise with the manufacturing space. And again, if there's an application that isn't available, don't assume that doesn't change. We do have a very large organization of people running after ISVs and making sure that one by one we hit them all and we close that availability gap. On the OpenSolaris side, you can see the community, again, has reached critical mass. It's taking off with things like Indiana, with being able to actually get the binary version of OpenSolaris and not have to assemble it yourself. I'm sure this curve will be even steeper next time we meet. And this is something that I always get a sense for whether people like open source, whether it's important to them. So I'd just like to have a quick show of hands. Who cares about open source? If nobody cares, I don't have to talk about it. Okay, other than the Sun folks. All right, 2, 3 in the back. Okay, so I'll keep this really short for the 2 in the back. Sun has a hard time being associated with being open. We always have to fight that image of being a proprietary Spark, Solaris-only hardware vendor. And fairly recently, there was a study done by the EU, and the results were fairly interesting, actually very interesting, because they listed Sun as the #1 open source contributor. There's no asterisk here, there's no small print. The #1 open source contributor, bigger than any other commercial entity, and actually in man-hours bigger than universities. So I hope I don't have to make that argument again. Let's talk a little bit about OpenSolaris, the project. The project was formerly, well, OpenSolaris itself is the open source project behind Solaris. Then we had something called Indiana, which was the internal code name, which of course got leaked in true Sun fashion, to create a binary distribution based on OpenSolaris and to make it way more accessible to people and to make it more familiar to people using Linux today, and just to basically look at the Linux model, look at what was working there, take all the good bits and keep all the good bits of Solaris, and then create something of an upgraded Linux distribution, I suppose, or version of it. And we've now named it back to OpenSolaris binary distribution, so the naming gets a little confusing. But really what it is, it's, as it says, the binary distribution of OpenSolaris, which is the basis for Solaris, and that means you get access to all the features that will eventually be in Solaris at some point right away. And that is the same model Linux uses. You don't have to wait. You can basically get access to innovation without having to wait for quality assurance cycles. If you don't want them, of course, you can still get the final polished Solaris 10 or enterprise version of it, but you don't have to wait. On the usability side, being able to have sound package management, just the user interface and the installation, simple things that Linux does really, really well today, we realized we had to carry over to the Solaris world. And that was something actually that Ian Murdoch brought over as, with his outsider perspective of what we should be doing to make Solaris more accessible. And at the same time, we're still keeping the emphasis on what Solaris has today that doesn't exist anywhere else. Features like ZFS that give you snapshot capabilities and innovation that we can build around there. So binary compatibility, another big thing that from version to version to version is actually going to make upgrading and interaction between the OSs and a lot easier. So pictures are always better than words. This is roughly what we're looking at for the model. I'll emphasize that Solaris 10 is in no way affected. Solaris 10 is today still in development. We're still seeing features, we're still seeing updates, and we still see the long-term support. So that is not in any way jeopardized. The attention isn't going away. In fact, today, and ever since OpenSolaris came about, engineers at Sun have been developing for OpenSolaris. Nobody develops for Solaris 10. They develop for OpenSolaris or for Nevada, the next code base. And then features get backported into Solaris 10 and undergo a rigorous Q&A cycle, which is actually why you see that delay in innovation being conceived and innovation being made available in Solaris 10. So if you don't want to wait that long, you can now go with the OpenSolaris binary distribution. There will be support for it. And of course, in this model, this is the open source model. We're not going to support the open source versions for 10 years like we do with Solaris 10, but we're actually going to be modeling how it works in, say, the Linux community today. And people in this space who care more about quick access to features will not mind so much that they have to upgrade or that support runs out after 18 months. Whereas the people at the top will still want to have their long-term support predictability. And then, of course, at some point, when Solaris 10 runs out of steam in a couple of years, we'll see a switch flicked and we'll move to the next version of the supported enterprise version, whatever we're going to call it, Solaris Next. And then that model will continue. So I hope that makes it a little bit clear what we're trying to do. And we're still talking about the one Solaris platform. It's just two different mechanisms of delivering it. And really the support is one aspect that where the two differentiate, and also the kind of audience that we're going after with those two distributions or with those two mechanisms. I'll just mention a word or two about ISVs. ISVs typically give not just Sun, but every software vendor a hard time, especially platform vendors, about supporting platforms. So one big advantage that we have, of course, is binary compatibility. And the other thing that is coming to the table, the other innovation or technology advancement that really is going to help with that is virtualization. So one of the things that you can do with things like XVM, our virtualization platform, is you can innovate on the platform. You don't have to wait for ISVs to certify for OpenSolaris or for the next version. You can actually keep that the equivalent of your DOM 0, basically the interface between the hardware and the higher level components. And you can innovate and bring new features, performance enhancements, etc., to that platform. And if an ISV will just absolutely not allow you to run it in that latest platform, well, then you can have a container, or you can have a DOM U effectively, which has the OS, the certified OS, and the application packaged in there. So virtualization actually helps address the challenge that we've had in the past about how quickly can we move with innovation and how quickly can we pull behind the ecosystem of applications and tools, etc., by third parties. All right, we talked about DTrace, and I still feel that people in HPC are ambivalent about DTrace. These are numbers that we typically get with applications, not HPC applications, but applications that undergo some DTrace testing, and that we use DTrace on. So these kind of performance numbers are huge. How much money would you guys spend to get a 300% performance improvement? Now, this may or may not be a typical result, but even the lowest result in this slide is something like 32%, and this is very typical. So bringing DTrace to HPC is something I think that would be benefiting the industry, and hurrying up would be benefiting me. 2 minutes. We're almost done. I just want to mention one other aspect of performance that comes up, and that by no means is solved today. Application jitter is one of those hard to grasp problems, and it really isn't clear whether there is a single silver bullet or not, but we're working on finding that out. In the meantime, Solaris actually gives you a lot of tools that help you address this today. If we just skip to the next slide, you can see that today there's a series of techniques, a series of features that you can use to try and combat application jitter and to make your application behavior deterministic. And that is stuff that Linux partially doesn't have, or Linux is getting right now, and it's still maturing. So it's worth looking at Solaris, and it's worth looking at the reasons. I'll skip those slides. Looking at the reasons why maybe a couple of years ago it was not part of your choice. Because many of those reasons have gone now, but you still have the same advantages. You know, still the old Sun mantra of Solaris is robust, it's available, it's scalable. They actually resonate really well with the HPC community. So having those advantages, I think, is something to bear in mind. I'll finish up just to say that we're looking at the high end, of course, of the market. The previous conference, ISC, was all about petascale architectures, but Solaris is equally suited. In fact, in many ways, Solaris has its traditional forte also in the commercial space, where things like availability, reliability, security, TCO do become important. And I think with OpenSolaris and with Indiana in particular, we will see, or you will see, you'll be able to look at Solaris almost like your alternative to Linux with an upgrade. You still get your performance, you get your applications, you get all the familiar stuff that you need today, but you do get extra innovation on top of that I think will make it very attractive to consider Solaris in the future. So that was a very quick, very high-level marketing presentation. I would encourage you to follow up either with me or with some of the engineers about any of the features that you care about. I'd love to hear feedback. I know we're running out of time. I'll take a question, and then I'll be here for the rest of the week for more grilling. Come on, one question.
So I have a question.
Except for Conrad.
I missed the first 10 minutes when Mark was here, but I noticed he actually had a CD with the binary distribution for OpenSolaris. And so how does that compare in size to what you can get for a binary distribution for a typical Linux environment as far as size goes?
So one of the things that Solaris is known for is its large footprint. And we really try to strip down Solaris to the mean, lean core of what you would need, and then you can build on top of that to, if you're in an HPC environment, you'll take your HPC components. If you're in a different environment, you'll take whatever you need in terms of extra packages and libraries and add to that. So what we're actually seeing now is a really minimal install, lightweight. It fits back on a CD. We've gone almost up to the DVD size and down to CD. It's something like, Rebecca, 600 megabytes-ish? Okay, no one's objecting. I think it's around about that, roughly that size, and the size of a CD. a little less than that. So, and you can try it out without having to install it. You've seen the live boot capability. I think we probably have a bunch of CDs at the booth next week. It's just come out, so you'll be on top of the news. Okay, one last question. InfiniBand, and Carl is going to crucify me for that. One of the reasons I didn't talk about InfiniBand was time. The other reason is we're going to be talking about it a lot at the week next week. There's a lot of stuff coming up with InfiniBand in the next couple of updates for Solaris 10. So update 5 has a bunch of things, enhanced capabilities. I mean, InfiniBand today isn't Solaris, if that is your question. Some of the advanced capabilities that we've been working on. Yeah, so this is like the advanced protocols, the advanced features that we've been working on. There's a whole slate of them coming out with update 5, which is any day now. I need to check with you on the timing for that. But of course, if you want to see InfiniBand in action, we do actually have it at the booth. So I believe we have some of those features, maybe as a preview.
Any other questions? Thank you, Matthew.